Hello, Nicholas.
Hello, Adam. How are you?
Dude, so good, so good. Today's a big day. We're talking about the book that I think every single individual should read. It is called Think and Grow Rich. Pop it out there. This is a seminal classic written in 1938. I'm very excited. Are you?
Oh, I'm very excited.
Yeah.
This was a very instrumental book for me.
Why is that?
A lot of mentors and blog posts where it was like the top books you need to read for business, self-development, leadership, all had Think and Grow Rich as one of the top 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, if successful people read this, I should probably read
Perhaps
this too.
you should.
Yeah.
This is an interesting book, in my opinion, because it took me 6 reads before it fully sunk in, and I knew, like, people will say, oh, well, it'll take you a few times. And I thought, that's crazy. I've read books before I get them on the first go round. Mm-hmm. And I read this book, and then it wasn't until about the 6th time that after I read it, I'm like, oh, now I get it. Mm. So my recommendation is to read it more than once in your life. In fact, I encourage people to read it at least once a year, just to go back and refresh, because some of the content is... it's like that. It's evergreen. It's good to just have a refresher.
Yep. And this book is so impactful that when you read it again, who you are when you read it, your life experiences, you are a different person as you read the same text.
Very true.
So it'll land and communicate differently too.
So let's dive into the text for people who have not read the book, or those that have, that want to chew on some of the content once again. One of the biggest... First of all, let's talk about where it came from.
Okay.
So why don't you handle that?
Sure. So... in the introduction, Napoleon Hill, who is the author, talks about how he came to meet Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie, as you know, is a titan in the industry and has built a massive amounts of wealth. And in working with Andrew Carnegie charged Napoleon with taking on a 20-year project where he would interview all the wealthiest, successful people of their time to see what are the rules that has people really be able to be rich.
Yep.
So Napoleon went on this 20-year journey and culminated it in this book.
Yes. He actually was kind of a modern day reporter.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's right.
So he was out interviewing people and coming up with the text that would become Think and Grow Rich. For those of you who don't know Andrew Carnegie, he was known as the steel magnate. So he ran the railroads, created Carnegie Steel, which provided all the steel for the railroads. Prior to that, he was a guy who worked on the telegraph system, and he loved the telegraph line so much that he started kind of investigating other forms of business that would take over, and the railways were the way to do that. So he created Carnegie Steel. And you'll notice that Carnegie is on a majority of public libraries across the country because he donated a significant amount of his wealth to the public library system. So kind of an interesting backstory.
You have definitely read it 6 times.
I have studied this stuff. One of the things that came out of this book that I think is the most important to know is the idea of definiteness of purpose. And we have talked about this on the show a couple times, but I'm curious what you've gotten out of reading it so far.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, there was actually in the very beginning, in the desire chapter, it talks about the definiteness of purpose and needing to know exactly what it is that you want. And when it comes to wealth, there's actually a paragraph, I'm going to pull it up. It says, there's 6 steps to achieve riches. And the first one is, and it says this, it says, fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say, I want plenty of money. Be definite as to the amount. So it talks about definite of purpose, right? Because if I say I want to make a lot of money versus I need exactly $2 million by the time I'm 60 to be able to retire comfortably, it's a very different game, and it contextualizes it. And then I can start to see it, feel it, breathe it, live it.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So to bring that to a real life context, at one point I was working with a chiropractor who was a little more woo-woo probably than most doctors are. But he was muscle testing me on certain aspects of my life, and we got to money. And he said, okay, hold your arm out, steady. I'm going to push against it. I want you to push up against it. And he said, I want you to make a statement. And the statement is, I love myself when I make enough money. And my arm stayed rigid and he couldn't move it. He said, then I want you to say, I love myself when I make more than enough money. So I did, and I was rigid.
Yep.
And then he said, I want you to say, I love myself when I make massive abundance. And when I said it, he pushed down and my arm immediately went down. And he said, what I would basically deduce from that is that you have no idea what massive abundance is. And he circled it back to this book and said, once you have definiteness of purpose, you know exactly what massive abundance is, you will be solid. But if you don't know what that is, you won't be able to achieve it.
Gotcha.
Interesting, right?
Yeah, very interesting. And one of the things as I'm rereading it again is it's having me question, and not in a bad way, not like doubt, but question be in the inquiry of, okay, how much money do I really want?
Yeah.
What is that number for me?
For sure.
And it was awesome because I can get, as we're on the path to mastery, we can get locked in or fixated or just, it's like we already know what we're working for.
Yep.
But having read this again, it's having me stop and like rethink and like realign, what's important to me and how much money I need and why.
Love it.
That's cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. So one of the, we had talked about this a little bit before, but one of the chapters that made the biggest difference for me in the book is chapter 9. And chapter 9 is persistence, the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. And one of the things that Napoleon Hill writes about a lot is belief, but also the faith that the work you're doing is going to provide dividends or make a difference in your life. And for me, when I read persistence and all of the theories around persistence in the book, it suggested that if I was going to be a professional speaker, as an example, that I couldn't go into it half-heartedly and think that in 6 months I'm going to make a massive difference towards that goal. There had to be consistent, persistent effort towards that goal in order for my faith to be realized. And so a lot of times we find that when we're dealing with coaching clients or people who want to break into speaking, as an example, and they'll do it for a short period of time, but they don't experience the amount of success they think they're going to have. And as a result, they lack faith in their ability to actually achieve it.
So can you read the title or the concept or theory of chapter 9 again?
Yep. So chapter 9 is persistence, the sustained effort necessary to induce faith.
Gotcha. Perfect.
I'll flip to it. Just see if there's anything that catches my eye.
Yeah. And one thing in the beginning of the book too, he actually talks about failure. And how failure really is the gift and really is the springboard that has people really be successful. And how you choose to look at it will dictate, your path to wealth. And obviously it requires a level of persistence to get through the failures. To be okay with it.
You'll love this. So it says, willpower and desire, when properly combined, make an irresistible pair. Men who accumulate great fortunes are generally known as cold-blooded and sometimes ruthless. Often they are misunderstood. What they have is willpower, which they mix with persistence and place back of their desires to ensure the attainment of their objectives. Now I read that, and one of our most recent episodes was about paying off your mortgage or paying off student loans. That is one of those things that, number one, you must have definiteness of purpose that you're going to do it. Because as you're getting closer and closer, a lot of people will veer off and go one direction or another. They'll say, well, it's not important that I pay it off. Now I'm going to go buy a car, or I'm going to go do something else. So that persistence and willpower is super important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's funny because when you said it was willpower and persistence or desire, the perfect pair. I thought you as willpower and me as desire.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, right. You are desired. I am willpower.
Or vice versa.
For sure.
Awesome. That's cool. Well. Is there anything else that you want to add? I think, one thing that I think we mentioned in the beginning, but this really is a culmination of interviews, stories from titans of the industry, and really from the Great Depression area, right? This book was written in 1938, so these are people, names that you have definitely heard and would recognize, and so they've stood the test of time.
No doubt. And the principles that are listed in the book, despite the fact that it was written in 1938, are still just as important today and relevant today as they were back then. So today, the advantage for us is that we have technology and we have speed of implementation and we have resources that they didn't have back then.
YouTube.
We have YouTube. Can you imagine? I mean, these guys were actually figuring things out on their own. They didn't have YouTube.
Oh, really?
So yeah, take a look at Think and Grow Rich. If you have not read it, definitely go pick it up. Nick is holding a version that we got at Barnes & Noble. It is the complete classic text. I actually got mine, which is a very fancy leather-bound version. I got mine at the Half Price bookstore.
Oh.
Half Price Books. So the encouragement for you is go read it.
Go read it.
Yeah.
And think. And grow rich.
And then grow rich. Oh, by the way, I will make one last comment.
Yeah.
It is think and grow rich. It's not do and grow rich, write and grow rich, meditate and grow rich. It is think and grow rich. So there is a ton in here about using just the power of your brain and how you build the life that you want through your thoughts.
Yeah.
So make sure and check that out. Explorers, thanks for joining us today. Tomorrow, we are talking about Rule 1 Investing, a book by Phil Town.
Yep.
Yeah.
Please subscribe and share, and we will see you tomorrow.
Adios.